Aye.
Short Bus Debate Club. It's a bus rolling.
I can get on board. Hello, I'm Darren Jolly.
It's time to get this short bus started. So let's roll and on with the show. Hello. Welcome to another edition of Short Bus Debate Club. I'm the guy sitting across the table from Darren Jolly.
Aye.
And my name is Brian Courtney.
That was a twist.
Yeah, not the usual intro. So we promised you guys a discussion on green energy, the green bubble that is currently inflating. I don't know. We're not going to talk about the economics in a whole lot of detail, but it might be bursting soon. I'm not positive. So some of the shit, like everybody is saying, okay, hydro, pneumatic, solar, all of these supposed sustainable and renewable resources, biomass, which is fucking not sustainable or renewable considering they're chopping down forests in order to do it.
Well, it's renewable in the sense that you can lay waste to an entire forest and you can replant it, and then 100 years later you got a new forest.
Right.
But in the annals of what it is that constitutes renewable, there's definitely some. It's a very unique take on, it's a pretty loose term right now, I guess would be the best way of putting that.
Yeah. And the thing that bothers me about, because biomass, so again, all of these things are great ideas, but we can't put all of our eggs in one basket, at least not yet, because the basket is fucking full of holes and, our energy is falling out of the bottom. And none of them are actually helping us reduce our reliance on fossil fuels.
Okay, so
which is what they're designed to do.
Yeah, so that's like the good sort of like at least teleological starting point, right? Like, so you've got a dipshit that's a former vice president of ours in the name of Al Gore, right? And he, I'm sure his rectal cavity hurt after he got fist fucked by the Supreme Court. And
I thought you were gonna say my tipper.
I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility or imagination, but I don't have any evidence to either support or put that claim out there. But either way, after the Bush was, we did not vote him into power. The Supreme Court decided to count 300 votes down in Florida and just hand it to him.
Hanging Chad.
Yeah, like for forever. Like anybody that's from that time period. I mean, everything on fucking CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News was about fucking hanging Chad. Hanging Chad next to Gore's Nate or Taint. That's it. But so either way, in the aftermath of what it was that happened, he had to keep himself busy, right? So he makes some sort of a movie that I think he ended up getting an Academy Award for it or something like that, right? And I think they actually gave him maybe a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that too. I don't have to go back and look and see whether
that might be right. I know the award thing because he got the best documentary thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Al Gore got a Nobel Prize.
Well, while you're looking that up, so the rhetorical disposition of inconvenient truth is, couched on the unsustainability of using fossil fuels until the end of time. Global warming. We're gonna.
He did.
Yeah. What?
Get he did a Nobel Peace Prize.
What year was it?
2007.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds about right. So, there were two things that he said in that, and of course, when we get into the culture stuff, I'll rip sort of like these discussions apart a little bit more. But there were two quotes that he used in that film that, in his sort of like fear, try to create fear in the hearts of people, and then creating this alternative way of thinking about how to move with regards to energy, um, as a way of demonizing fossil fuels. And fuels need to be demonized on some level, but there's no doubt that in terms of scalability, we are capable of continuing to function with regards to our energy demands with them, but there are consequences for them. So, which is the main thrust of the discussion there. But he uses two quotes in this that sort of like framed uh, my understanding of how he was trying to scare people into action, right? So the first one was a quote by Winston Churchill, and he says, "The era of procrastination, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients, of delays is coming to its close. In its place, we are entering a period of consequences," right? So that was something Churchill said November 12th, 1936. It was, while Hitler was coming into power, but well before Churchill had become prime minister in England at the time. But he's obviously, Al Gore's trying to compare the environmental problems that were going on, or are going on in the world right now, with um, the existential threat that Germany was providing to Europe at that time, right? And that we can't hem and haw. We have to really act, and we have to act quickly. We have to act decisively, and we have to just bomb full speed ahead, right? And the second quote that he uses, it was taken from an Upton Sinclair book that he wrote about his run for governor in California in 1934. The book was called "I Candidate for Governor and How I Got Licked." Right, so it's about that experience. But the quote that Upton Sinclair wrote in there was, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something if his salary depends on his not understanding it," right? I mean, pretty straightforward. If you have financial interests tied to the continuation of a specific disposition, whether it's an industry, an ideological disposition, whatever, if it ties to your fucking job, it's not in your interest to recognize the truth or the facts of it, right?
Well, ignorance is bliss.
Well, I mean, and not only bliss, but if your job depends on it, it pays a lot better too.
Yeah, well, that's part of the bliss.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do what, and Al Gore probably has a better salary than most people.
I think that it would be, especially when you win a Nobel Prize, I think they give you $1 million. So, I mean, he was making some extra scratch on the side. I think that the Inconvenient Truth, when they put the fucking movie out, I'm sure in terms of documentary, it was probably gross as high as any, one of the top grossing documentaries of all time at that point. But the reason why I brought those up is that you have this rhetorical disposition, we have to act, right? And this other rhetorical disposition that basically was suggesting, if you're going to go to a scientist who's getting paid by an oil or gas company and try to persuade them to look at the potential dangers of what it is that they're purporting with regards to their industry and scientific position, and anything that would deviate from that through a different scientific position or industry position, they're not gonna recognize it. So when I started to look at the green energy stuff, and started to look deeper and deeper, and like you said, like, of course, wind is one of those things that we have, and it's gonna keep being there. If you have a fucking water going from one place to another, and the water goes off of like a spillway, that's got potential energy in it, and you can utilize that to create, hydroelectric positions and all those kinds of things. The sun's there, it produces radiation, and and I'm not a scientist. Like, I don't get all the dynamics of physics. I don't get all the dynamics of energy, but there are certain obvious truths about these things that are present in our daily life. But the big concern, when I started to look at it through a tighter microscope, was that as the industry for green energy started to steamroll, that maybe some of the things in Al Gore's call to action and his condemnation of the scientists that were connected to oil and gas, it might be a little bit ironic and hypocritical as we look at some of the green energy questions. So, I mean, but having said that, we still have to, we got to come up with some solutions. We got to figure it out. So they started to try to figure it out with these different iterations of green energy.
Yeah, and I mean, dude, people have been using windmills for a long fucking time. They generally used it to pump water, to feed the fucking livestock.
To inspire
Or
random Spanish guys going through the desert to become knights.
yeah, well, none of the windmills in Colorado. I guess you could, because then when you're, fighting a windmill, you might win because they're smaller. But
we might not be as quixotic as they were, though.
Right. Windmills to like make flour.
They made flour with windmills?
Yeah, a lot of them would turn the big fucking wheel to
make a
crush.
grinder, kind of? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So windmills have been around for a long time, but now we have these new big ass windmills, and not just a windmill, but wind farms. Like, so up in northern Colorado, there's an area there's a canyon that comes out of the mountains. And when that wind hits the canyon, even if it's not very windy, there's an airport on the east side. And the wind will come out of there and blow fucking planes over, the ones that are like, parked.
Just idle stations.
Yeah. So they decided to put a wind farm up there. Now, you're still not going to get wind all of the time, no matter how strong it is. But I've got a couple of issues with wind farms. And on the last environmental episode, I talked about it a little bit. And that is, you've got huge magnets in there. It's generating electricity, so it's fucking up the land. So you can't grow anything around the turbine. It kills migratory birds.
A ton of migratory
birds. Yes. And when you're talking like, and I'll get into some more detail here in a minute, but I mean, they're building these huge fucking wind farms. And, if one of them that has, say, 10 or 15 of these windmills, wind turbines, is killing migratory birds, then imagine what a wind farm that has 100 or 150 or 200 of them is going to do. It's just outrageous.
But aren't those birds just a small price to pay for the energy that we need to survive?
Yes, absolutely. We don't need birds anyway. Fuck birds. How important are they?
I don't think it would be very fun to fuck birds. I don't think that'd be very nice either.
As long as they're not a keystone species, it's fine. So let me get into a little bit of detail just so that you can understand what we're talking about. So they rate these turbines by megawatt, meaning that they're going to generate X number of megawatts.
Is that based on a potential or like an average, or like how's it?
The potential for the way that they put the magnet in there and everything else. So as long as the wind is consistent at, I don't know, X number of days throughout the year, then it'll generate this amount.
But it's in relative terms or absolute terms. Like it's just like it's not like they went and they ran them for 2 years.
No, everything is relative, dude. And when you're talking about corporate America, everything is relative to where they look better than they should.
Yeah, that stuff I get. I was just trying to imagine in my head like if you're talking about like the potential, like they weren't running any tests at first. It was just like if we imagine that there's a wind coming at 22 miles an hour on an average of Y amount of time for 300 days out of 365 days a year. This is what we can expect to get. Is that sort of like the way that they did the calculation, or do they just do it like straightforward? Like, what would it be for the entire?
No, it's based on, again, the magnets and the rotors and how many times the rotor will spin in order. I don't know how they fucking rated it. It doesn't say at a wind speed of 35 miles per hour for 45 days. It didn't say anything like that.
Just like, but I mean, if they're going to throw out a number like that, I mean, it would seem like reasonable to.
Right, but again, it's just based on like the coils and magnets and how much electricity can be generated.
Okay.
So it's a 2 megawatt wind turbine.
What's capable? Just a straight capabilities question.
Yes.
Okay.
So just to clear things up a little bit, basically, oh, come on. So a megawatt is basically, I have all this fucking electric shit here. Yeah, I know. Fuck.
I think that Alex Trebek is going to come back to life, and he's going to die again while you're looking through this.
A megawatt is essentially 1 million watts, or 1,000 kilowatts. And that's pretty straightforward. So a light bulb is 100 watts. You know, but then it gets a little more complicated than that because everybody's home is powered and they rate it at what they call a kilowatt hour. Okay, so for every kilowatt hour, you're billed X number of dollars or X number of cents. Well, a kilowatt hour is the amount of time that it takes to generate a kilowatt. So it's not necessarily an hour, but if you've got 1,000 watts running in your house every hour, then you end up with 24 kilowatt hours in a day.
Okay.
Right? Yep. So these wind turbines, a lot of them are rated at 2 megawatts, but they have some as big as 14 megawatts. I don't know if we want to jump into this right now or not, but another problem that I have with the turbines and really green energy as a whole is that they use a lot of rare earth elements.
We'll get back to that. Talk about the numbers first, though, because it's important. Because you're talking about, so you've got a turbine that's there, right? Or you have a farm, right? So you got Y amount of turbines, which has the capability of producing Z amount of kilowatt hours or megawatts, whatever it is that you're using in terms of your measurements. I mean, what is a wind turbine going to be able to do in terms of? I mean, is it gonna light up a city? Is it gonna light up a city the size of Cheyenne? Is it gonna light up a city the size of Laramie? Is it gonna light up a city the size of Denver? Like,
well, okay, so I guess I can kind of answer that question. Here in the United States, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, over the course of a year, the average household uses 11,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay.
In 2022, the United States used 4.05 trillion kilowatt hours. That was 14 times greater than the amount of electricity that we used in 1950. Okay? So that kind of will give you an idea how little these wind farms actually generate for our consumption. And keep in mind that those are just US numbers.
So you said the turbines produce what were the megawatts that you said? There's 2 or between 2 and 24
Well,
or something like that?
there are some that are smaller than 2, but generally in the wind farms, they're going to be at least a 2, and some of them are as large as 14. Now, they are in the process of doing this thing in the North Sea. It's a wind farm. It's called the Dogger Bank Wind Farm. And I think, if I remember correctly, because I didn't write it down, but I think the Dogger Bank Wind Farm is going to have a total of 190 of these 14 megawatt turbines.
And that's a big wind farm.
That's a pretty large wind farm, but here's the thing is that a 14 megawatt turbine is going to be like 853 fucking feet tall. The blades on it are 351 feet across. So, I mean, it's huge. Absolutely fucking huge. That's like having just a skyline of fucking wind turbines. I mean, because that's a skyscraper. That's 85 stories.
And because you're in the North Sea, it's optimal because you have. I mean, it's one of the nastiest, fucking windiest motherfucking places on the planet. So it's gonna be pretty steady for wind.
That's again the theory behind it.
I understand. I'm just trying to see the positives in relation because when we start to hit the fucking negatives, there's gonna be some.
But wind still dies, regardless of where you are. But yeah, I'm sure that's why they put it there, is because it is windy. And I think another reason is that it's probably shitty and cold, and
people aren't going to be hanging out.
Nobody wants to live there.
It's just yeah.
But if you just think about, okay, so let's say you don't give 2 shits about the environment and how that's going to affect sea life or birds migrating or whatever. The only thing you care about is whatever it is you care about at the time, which is how convenient life can be for you. So if you have 190 85-story turbines in the middle of the fucking ocean, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that fucks with small aircraft. It definitely fucks with things like helicopters and shit like that. I don't know what it would do. Like, I don't know exactly where it's going to be or how much area it's going to take up, but it could fuck with landing and taking off of even large aircraft. I mean, so take the environment shit out, you're putting a small city in the middle of the North Sea, except not very many people live there. So I don't know. I was gonna jump into the rare earth thing, but you said come back to it.
I just wanted to fuck around with the numbers for a second to make it clear that, like, if you're gonna try to run, you're not producing enough with the megawatts that you're going to be able to produce throughout the course of a year. Right. You're not even offsetting, like, your relative intention to offset energy demand is so limited.
Yeah, but they're making billions and billions of dollars for GE.
Yeah. So okay. So I mean, there's a huge business side of it, but now go into your rare earth minerals.
Well, not just the rare earth minerals. I couldn't find the specs for the 14 megawatt one because they're, fairly new. I'm sure GE didn't want everybody to know. But GE's sales pitch is that since they generate 14 megawatts, you're not going to have to use as much fuel building them because it's only going to be one, so you don't have to run all these 2 megawatt turbines out there. But the 14 megawatt is so much larger. I mean, because it's 853 feet tall. The 2 megawatt one is like, depending on the model, is anywhere between 3 and 500 feet tall. So at a 2 megawatt windmill, you use 1,300 tons of concrete, which means that they dig a shitload of aggregate. So there are huge fucking holes in the ground just for the aggregate rock to make the concrete. There's 295 tons of steel, which means they're burning a shitload of coal to make the steel. 48 tons of iron, 24 tons of fiberglass, 4 tons of copper, 0.4 tons of neodymium, and I think I might be pronouncing that correctly, and 0.065 tons of dysprosium. And then there's a bunch of other shit too. But the two main rare earth elements are the neodymium and the dysprosium. So, but there's still the copper and the iron and all of that other stuff that we actually have to mine. And they're not using like some fancy no fossil fuel using tools in order to get that shit out of the ground. And they're, again, digging huge fucking pits out of the ground to find the copper, the iron, and the rare earth elements.
Are you suggesting that while they're producing these wind turbines, that there's actually other consequences with regards to the mining operators that produce the things that they have to produce to make them in the first place?
I am suggesting that. Weird.
So what are some of the byproducts and shit that it creates? What are some of the offshoots?
Well, and this goes for just about all of the green solutions. Because solar cells use rare earth elements. Obviously, the wind turbines do. Electric cars do. So let me clarify what a rare earth element is, because when I first heard about them in the late 90s, I thought they called them rare earth elements because there weren't very many of them in the earth.
You were taking it at face value.
Yes, based on the name. The term, though, is misleading, because the reason they actually call them rare earth elements is because, well, I don't know why they call them that, but the reason that they're so hard to mine is because they are so close in chemical composition that it's difficult to separate these things out. There's a total of 17 of them on the periodic chart. Some of them are extremely fucking cool. Like there's this one called gallium. It will actually melt in your hands. But the boiling point...
So it's not like an M&M.
But the boiling point is over 2,000 degrees.
It melts in your hand, but it takes that much to make it boil.
Yeah, weird,
so
right?
Turn it into a liquid. That's fucking odd. Yeah, okay.
So there's a bunch of them, and they're extremely sought after because of their conductivity. They make great fucking magnets that are super strong, which again is why they're using them in turbines, electric cars, yada, yada, yada. For every ton of rare earth elements that they mine, 2,000 tons of toxic waste are created.
Byproducts, yes, byproducts. But this is green energy, folks. This is the greenest of
That
green
is
energy.
absolutely green. So I just want to make sure, because it wasn't a mistake what I said. 1 ton equals 2,000 tons. So you get 1 ton of something that's valuable to some people and 2,000 tons of shit that will fuck everybody up.
We'll get into this a little bit more later, but when you think about like the rhetorical arguments that were made against nuclear initially, a lot of it was about byproducts. I mean, it was about the consequences of the rods, what you got to do to deal with, storing them in the aftermath and blah, 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 blah. When you look at the relative byproduct position between both of those, it's kind of comical that, like, and again, like, I'm not making an argument. We, like, nuclear, we got to look at all these things by themselves. We got to look at fossil fuels by themselves. We got to look at the various different iterations of so-called green energy by themselves, and we got to look at nuclear by itself. We got to look at different iterations of nuclear by itself. But it would be valuable for us to at least understand that these things that certain industries and particularly certain spaces, rhetorical spaces on the left, have become so reverent towards, maintain such a fervent, almost like religious disposition, towards their potential. We need to understand that we got to look at it through the big picture. We got to look at what the real outcome is. Everybody talks about fucking our carbon footprint. I mean, if a fucking ton, and what was the number again?
2,000 tons.
2,000 tons of byproducts.
And that doesn't even include like the shit like the boat that had to run the ore somewhere, or the trucks that mined the ore to begin with. That's just the process of separating them out.
Where are most of them being mined? What's the areas?
So they're like really everywhere. Here in the United States, there's a huge one in the Mojave called Mountain Pass, and the company that owns it just opened up a processing facility down in Dallas. I think it was Dallas, somewhere down in Texas. We have a rare earth mine less than 10 miles away from us. But once you get the ore, most of it is being shipped to China because they can process it. So China has this mine for rare earth called the Bayan Obo, and they create 70,000 tons of toxic radioactive waste every year.
How do you spell it?
Bayanobo. And if you look up pictures of this place, I mean, it is just a fucking nightmare looking place. Up in Upper Mongolia, probably not too far from the Bayanobo mine, they were mining rare earth minerals, and everybody started getting sick. Basically, they had to shut 4 square miles down. It turned the Earth's crust into an actual crust. Everything was dead. No plant, animal life. I mean, it was just gone. Mm-hmm. 4 square miles for rare earth elements. And I want to clarify just to some degree that, these people, just the consumer that says, oh, well, I'm green. I wear an Earth Day t-shirt, and I
have an electric car.
I planted some stuff once.
I recycle everything.
Right.
I buy my coffee from Starbucks, and they donate 32 cents out of every coffee that I get to
And they make sure that
green energy.
their farmers are treated fairly, and yeah.
Yeah.
So those people. But those people also buy a new fucking cell phone every year. And cell phones, while they are extremely light, have a large amount of rare earth elements because anything with an LED screen is going to use REEs. Anything with a flash,
REEs?
yeah, rare earth elements.
Oh wow, okay. You're teaching me some things right now. I appreciate it. And I'm kind of slow sometimes.
No, so any computer, electronics, communication, the government fucking loves rare earth elements because, again, the conductivity of it, it makes communications faster, makes things lighter, does all of these great things, smaller.
Puts a GPS tracking system in everybody's pocket.
Correct. They So all of these people that think they're being green have no fucking idea that, that new cell phone, their electric car. So you mentioned the electric car thing. So let's see. An electric car, again, depending on brand or whatever, because everybody has an electric car now, has between 1 to 2 kilograms of rare earth elements in it. In addition to the rare earth elements, the cars are actually, because you can't say, well, how many miles per gallon does it get? Because it's fucking electric. But so I only looked up Tesla because while I know there are other electric cars out there, Chevy Volt and all of these, it seems like every dumb yuppie cocksucker that wears a visor and gel in their hair and
if we ever have like direct conversations with these people, you're going to endear yourself to a lot of these centrist lefties. That's for sure.
So Tesla, their vehicles run between 25 to 36 kilowatt hours for every 100 miles. A tank, a charge, will basically do 75 to 100 kilowatt hours for a charge, because some of them, you can go 452 miles, some of them you can go 250. So anywhere between 75 and 100 kilowatt hours for every charge. So all of these people that are like, yeah, I drive an electric car, so I don't use fossil fuels. Well, you dumb cocksucker, electricity, for the most part, is being generated by coal-fired plants, which, for those of you that don't understand what coal is, it's a fucking fossil fuel.
Well, and even if you make the absurd natural gas argument, because there are a lot of power plants that have shifted to natural gas, like natural gas is also
a fossil fuel, yeah.
Right? And when you're transporting natural gas in pipelines from one place to another, or refining it, getting it ready to where it can be work it into a usable form and all that kind of stuff. When they have leaks, it leaks as methane, right? I mean, and when methane leaks into the environment, when you talk about what it is that's causing the greenhouse effect, and that's, I mean, it's funny because and don't worry, people on the left that we're talking shit about right now. I'm going to talk shit about people on the right too.
Well, I'm sure some of them on the right are buying the fucking electric cars too.
Yeah. So, but in addition to that, like some assholes that talk about methane, they make some sort of like asinine rhetorical argument that people are saying the greenhouse effect is being produced by cow farts, right? I mean, no, I mean there are these other things that we use that are causing problems, and to be honest with you, I mean, like I know factory farming has a lot of like residual effects that affect methane. Again, I'm not a scientist, so like, and like part of the reason why we do this is because we go and we look at this stuff, we read this stuff, and we're learning as we go too, in a lot of ways. But this obsession with these solutions, like electric cars, like the other forms of the solar farm, I mean the wind farms, and we'll get into solar a little bit more later, but um, we think that it's a solution by only looking at very limited parts of what it is that's allowing for these things to function in the first place. It doesn't matter whether you're getting it from coal, you're getting it from fucking natural gas. You're not getting clean energy from a power plant if you're getting it from a power plant that uses either natural gas or using coal.
Or even biomass.
Yeah, biomass is worse than all of those. I mean, so
yeah, I mean there are some power plants out there that are green because they're using biomass, and the original idea was to use waste from national forest trees that had naturally fallen or whatever. But in order to keep these plants up and running, they've created an entire, and maybe that was their intention to begin with, but they've created an entire new timber industry, and they're cutting fucking forests down left and right so that they can feed these plants.
And when they're burning them, they're not. It's not like you're taking forests that have been dried out and are in a good state to sort of like get converted. I mean, you're taking shit that's basically living still, it's wet, which means that you have to use more energy to burn it, which means that again, like you're creating this energy position where you're using this gigantic energy position to create that energy position in the first place. So whatever rhetorical space that you're utilizing in your mind to say that you're offsetting something, you're it's a total fucking joke. And in relation to the electricity stuff, like if like so like say you're using solar, say you're using wind, say you got these wonderful fucking wind turbines that are producing a certain amount of energy for the region that you're in, but then the wind just fucking dies, and you got no fucking wind, but you still have to have a grid that's capable of functioning. What is it that keeps your grid functioning at that point in time? Because it's not like you have these gigantic cells that can store. It's not like it was really windy for like 36 days straight, and we were able to harness that wind and store it, and we got it all in this storage place so that we can use it for we don't have storage capabilities like that. Sure, there's some people that are working on it, and I want them to keep working on it. I also want them to look at what they're using to try to do it, so that unlike what we're doing with solar, where we sort of bypass the fact that you take fucking, crystals, and you take fucking coal and you heat them at really fucking high temperatures and then turn them into something. Another one of those moments where we conveniently don't look at what it is that it's necessary for us to create solar panels in the first place, but it's creating byproducts and difficulties and problems that are not good for our environment in the first place. So ultimately, when the wind dies, when the solar dies, in those time periods, you have to reach out to the grid, and you're going to get your energy from coal or natural gas again in those moments.
Well, and it's there the entire time because it's running idle.
It has to run idle.
Yeah, because if you restart it, then it ends up taking more fossil fuels to get everything fired up.
It's like starting your car, but it's like starting a really, really, really big car.
Right, to power a fucking city or a state, or like the fucking eastern seaboard or the tri-state area or whatever. Yeah, so they've got to, so it's always on and always burning fossil fuel regardless of what it is you do. So again, I am not saying that green energy is a bad idea. I am saying what you just said. we need to look into it a little bit more. We need to do more research and development. We need to figure out how to, maybe put an egg in each basket instead of putting all of them in the one. Uh, the fact of the matter is, no matter what you do, anything at too great a quantity is probably bad for the environment. And the reason that I say that is because when I was doing my research, I found this fucking article on Harvard's website from back in 2016, talked about this new process for separating the rare earth elements, and basically they boasted the fact that they could separate the rare earth elements through, depending on how heavy they were, either a 2 or 3 step process. And basically they used something that was no worse for the environment than, say, citric acid or a natural acid. But if I take citric acid and I go dump the bag of citric acid on the lawn, it's going to kill the fucking lawn. If I just dump a pile of citric acid out there. Coors Beer has had 2 different spills that I know of throughout the years. One of them went into Clear Creek, and all of the fucking fish died forever. Like, Coors got in a lot of trouble with the EPA. The other one is where it burned the entire mountain, and they call it Zima Hill now.
Because they took the fucked up environmental space and did a huge house development there to kind of like hide the fuck up that they made. But I'm just gonna say, just on behalf of the citric acid stuff, there are instances where citric acid has great capabilities under certain circumstances.
Super, super duper potential. I fucking love it myself. But beer is made from fucking barley and natural shit, and of course you put it through this fermentation process, and so it becomes a little bit acidic. So if you dump one beer on the ground, it's fine. But if you dump 50,000 gallons of beer, it's going to burn some shit up and kill some fucking wildlife. So the reason that I said that is because these Harvard guys are bragging that it's no worse than, a natural acid, or the byproduct isn't. But if we're mining all of these rare earth elements at the quantities that we are, because everybody needs the new cell phone and the electric car and all of this, then that still ends up being somewhat toxic. It's just less toxic than the stuff we're using now, and less toxic might be acceptable. But I just wanted to put that out there because I think when you read that article, you think, great, they've done it. We've solved the issue. And we didn't solve it, we just made it a little bit better.
Or we have a real bad habit, when we're jumping from one moment to the next, where like you think about things in terms of solutions and you look at them in the abstract, and you have to get this massive amount of investment to create shifts from one type of energy production to another. That's why I looked at that quote. Like they were talking so much shit about the financial investment in the fossil fuel position initially, and it literally just seems, when you look at like green energy, or I just wonder, like, this is where capitalism, when it comes to like capitalism as an innovator, is an incredible machine. Like it creates these spaces where people have incentives to develop and to grow and to churn, to move. But there's this darker side of it, where once you create an investment position, like in Inconvenient Truth, there's this moment where Al Gore's talking to Richard Branson. Well, Al Gore and Richard Branson are being interviewed by some dude. I'm not sure who the person is. And there's this space in the wake of no, actually, it wasn't an Inconvenient Truth. It was in the Planet of the Humans movie where they're talking about the influence that Al Gore had on the development of investment into green energy and how all this money started to be channeled into these different development positions. And in the interview, Al Gore's sitting there with Richard Branson, the dude that owns Virgin Records and has his island, and he's a struggler. He's really had a very tough life. That poor Richard Branson fellow.
Yeah.
But the interviewer says, with all this this change towards green energy, do you think Al Gore was a prophet? And Richard Branson, without even says, how are you spelling profit? I mean, so you have these R&D positions. When I think about like patents like that, when I think about developments with regards to technologies in terms of how to get whether it's the rare earth minerals out, or you create a new way of doing nuclear power or anything, once you start to see investment in these, and you see money being channeled from the government to it, and corporate investment, and what do you call the venture capital investment, there's a disincentive to find a real answer to a solution. And like lemmings, we are running to, and I'll get more into this in the second half. There's a book that this douchebag, well, I don't want to say total douchebag, Michael Schellenberg, I have a lot of respect for because of what he did with the Twitter files with Matt Taibbi and all them. But he wrote this book called, what the fuck was the name of the book called? Give me 2 seconds here. Now you can.
So he's at least half a douchebag.
Yeah, he's half a douchebag. Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. But he basically suggests that that there's like a new sort of religious, there's a lot of things that he says in the book, but there's this sort of new religious ethos that we're overestimating the potential consequences of what is that's happening in the environment. He's got a number of, like I said, I'll talk more about like what he talks specifically in the book, but he basically suggests that rising seawater, melting ice caps, greenhouse, raising temperatures, it's not going to be as detrimental to the human race as maybe we think it is. And like he believes in the virtue of innovation and capitalism, and he even makes the suggestion that we should go back to fossil fuels. But he makes an interesting argument about how we need to turn to nuclear energy. Again, like I'll talk about this more later, but he honestly suggests that things can continue to go along the same path without having any like real horrible consequences. And I think that there's a level of obnoxious arrogance to this. And I think that the point that he makes about what he calls them is Malthusian left-wing environmentalists, suggesting that we're the belief is that there's been this V curve, and because of the potential for environmental catastrophe, there will be this gigantic, something close to an extinction level event where we would essentially all almost be dying entirely and would start eating each other. Whatever that apocalyptic position would look like. But he thinks we're being alarmist, and I think that's really naive at this point. I think that when you live in a finite position with finite resources, you need to think about your stewardship as a human being in relative social terms, along the lines of making sure that you don't fucking do something stupid like that. So when you start to measure your ability to create solutions, whether you're talking about fossil fuel or green energy or nuclear energy or all these various different iterations, you have to understand the value of capitalism, or the concepts that capitalism brings us, just like Marx did. It's funny because he talks all this shit about fucking Marx in the book, and when he does his little speeches about it, I think he's probably like most people. I think he probably didn't even read the manifesto. He read somebody else's interpretation of a piece of propaganda that was produced to persuade the British working class to try to, create a revolution in England in 1848, as opposed to looking at the analysis. But Marx definitely respected what it was that capitalism brought to the table. He just suggested that there were tensions that were going to create problems, that those problems would lead to further tensions and changes in the way that the system, because that system was going to be contradictory and fall on its fucking face, which I think after we've been watching it for, a couple hundred years now, I don't think that he was probably wrong about that. But having said that, at some point in time, you have to be able to harness the innovation capabilities that capitalism gave us, but create a balancing mechanism in relation to that where we understand that once people get invested in a certain industry, a certain energy industry, a certain energy potential, if we start to realize what the pitfalls of those energy positions are, we need to be examining other possibilities. We need to continue to grow. We need to continue to think about it. We need to be talking about it dynamically, dialectically. Like we need to be fighting with one another, trying to find real solutions, not just allowing the fucking market and people's financial interests in relation to that market, who are essentially only going to feed us rhetorical dispositions that protect their financial interests, not giving us the full story.
Yeah, just so that they can make sure and make more money. Yeah, and if we go back to like the turbines, I could find the stats for how big all of the 2 megawatt ones were, but I couldn't find the stats for what composed a 14 megawatt one.
Because of what you said earlier.
And it's because, so if you're talking about the difference between 2 megawatts and 14 megawatts, then those magnets in the turbine and those coils have to be so much bigger that they're using so much more of those rare earth elements that, they're creating probably 10,000 tons worth of fucking toxic waste for each one of the 14 megawatt ones.
But because their financial position is hidden, it's a part of a patent. They're not going to give us all the information, and because of the fact that if they did, then that would be a way of admitting that the consequences of their financial position in relation to their production position is an order of magnitude worse than even the initial. Like you said, the bigger ones are producing more byproducts, more problems, more negative outcomes that we are not allowed to look at because of the sacred cow of R&D and capitalism.
And it just made me laugh because they're talking about how, they have to take fewer trips, so they're using less fuel, when they go out there. But the fact is that all of this stuff weighs more and it's bigger, so they have to use bigger boats. And the more your vehicle of any sort, plane, train, automobile, the more it weighs, the more fuel you're going to take. So, the entire thing is bullshit. I think it is all about making money. And so when I found that Harvard thing, I started calling and trying to find out more information.
Elaborate. So the Harvard thing, you found that was
the rare earth element.
The patent thing that
the process. Okay, so I started calling because in the article they talked about how they had filed for patents, and I couldn't find the patents. I was on the patent website, I couldn't find them. So I asked a series of questions to the department that had developed the technology to separate these in a more environmentally happy way.
Environmentally happy. It was a green separation.
Yeah, I didn't get the answer that I was looking for.
Seeds and stems
from. So, she told me, the first woman I contacted said, if I can't find it, I'm going to contact this Office of Technology development or business development or whatever. So I decided to take it upon myself to contact them directly. And on their website, I found all of these fucking patents. I mean, they've got a ton of stuff. So one of my questions to her was, have any companies adopted this? How much are you charging, or are you, giving it to actually make a positive impact on the environment? And I think those are the questions that kind of scared her. The second woman actually gave me the patent number, but she didn't give me any other information. I couldn't find any companies that were using the process. That doesn't mean they're not out there.
Of course not. Yeah.
But I'm guessing they are not out there. Again, that's just a guess. But I am thinking that Harvard is charging a whole shitload of money for this process if they want to use it. And companies don't want to pay it because they're making billions of dollars selling their fucking rare earth elements to Apple or whatever company makes the drones for the United States government. And why bother trying to save the environment? Because it's going to make it to where instead of, making $120 billion, they only made 118.
Are you suggesting that these green energy companies aren't functioning in the interest of environmental concerns?
Right, and Harvard, because I wouldn't call them a green energy company, but yeah.
Well, Harvard, when Cornel West talked shit about Israel and their treatment of the Palestinians, a guy that's got like fucking 3 PhDs and written 100 fucking books and had worked there as a tenured professor for a long time, they fired his ass. So yeah, I just the altruistic disposition of Harvard, I think, is pretty much the nail in that coffin is pretty well demonstrated. So.
Yeah. Now, I did find out that at least on an outward consumer level or a PR level, they're trying to figure it out. Because so the way the process works right now is the Mountain Pass mine in the Mojave, they come up with this toxic waste. Well, what they've been doing is they turn it into a paste and then sprinkle it over the desert, which I think is great.
A toxic waste paste?
Yeah.
You paint the desert with many colored toxic waste?
DARPA is working on a project. When you say DARPA is working on a project, you know that there are going to be positive results.
Yeah, it's all that. I mean, again, like altruism, like it's all when you're talking about the development of the use of war, technologies and capabilities. That's really all about the love of humanity.
So they're in the first phase right now of this project called Ember, and Ember is supposed to be a way to, again, separate these rare earth elements, but they're using, I think it was bacteria, but they call it biomining because there are these bacteria that live in volcanoes that basically sustain themselves off of eating the rare earth elements. So they're trying to use these bacteria to do the same thing for them. How that's going to work, I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like the opposite of what they're wanting to do. They just want to eat around it, not the actual whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, whatever.
I don't know. But they're in phase 1 right now. If phase 1 is successful, then they'll move to phase 2 in like 2024. But again, it's so new.
Where the fuck did you find that, dude?
I'm a researcher motherfucker.
That's all I got to say.
So, yeah, I don't know where things are going, what is coming next. I think that honestly people are trying. The thing that scares me though is that if all of their research comes up with some new process that actually works and could make a positive impact, I think what's going to happen is they're going to just
Bury it.
well, either bury it or try to make shitloads of money off of it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to making money.
No, you're a capitalist.
And I'm not opposed to at least trying to break even for the time and money that you spent on the research.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the markups, especially since we're talking about a place where all of us fucking live and all of us have a fucking personal stake in, I think it would be nice if they said, you know what, we'll make 10% on this, or, you know, whatever.
No matter what, when you construct an equation for how you make choices for a society, it would be valuable at some point in time to not bracket the significance of survival of the species and the planet and all those various different things in relation. I mean, I'm just shooting from the hip here, you know, but it might not be a bad idea to not just at least consider it, but like include it in that equation. Make it a part of, you know, balancing out those choices.
So, there were some things I wanted to talk about that are definitely environmentally significant. But we are at an hour and 6 minutes. I know we've been going an hour and 15. But I'm hotter than a motherfucker and I need to smoke. Is there any way we can stop this one?
I don't think that's
and come back and then we can talk about the nuclear stuff and whatever else?
Only if you'll allow me the moment of making the observation that as we talk about trying to create a nice balance for including what it is that's essential for us to be able to survive as a species, to make sure that creating the space for us to go both and puff on a piece might have a certain measure of contradictory irony in relation to that too. But we never claimed that we were, you know, the crystallization of the ideal type for it. But we are pretty good at like pointing out the inconsistencies on a systemic level.
Oh no, I'm fucking inconsistent. I know that I'm one of the people that is helping to contribute to the fact that we're about to fall off the cliff, but I'm not contributing nearly as much as others. And
we're at least trying to talk it through.
Yeah, and I'm not pointing my finger. You know, I am pointing my finger, but I'm also realizing that I'm one of them to be pointed at.
Yeah, you got the one going out and the three coming back, and you know that the three are coming back for good reason. So.
Yeah, I don't. Just anyway, we'll talk more, and the next episode might be longer because I think we've got more to cover. Mm-hmm. I know we've got more to cover, but I think it's going to be a lot more.
We got some thoughts, like you said, nuclear, and I'm gonna pound the shit out of Schellenberger a little bit more. A little bit more too. So
because of the book and the Planet of the Humans thing. You know, I didn't like a lot of the stuff we talked about in the other environmental episode. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff I did know. I didn't know that a lot of these companies that are, you know, supposed to be biomass are burning shit that they should not be burning. I'm not just talking about the fucking timber that they're cutting down. I'm talking about shit that is actually fucking poisonous.
Yeah. Like nasty shit, toxic shit. Yeah. And the people that are like, when you go and you fucking talk to them about it, like you go fucking talk to the Sierra Club about it, and they'd be like giving you some fucking hyper political response, you know, or like, so do you support this? Well, hem and haw and hem and haw ha ha. Hem and haw.
And that one guy, what's his name? Bicken.
Oh my, Bill McKibben.
He fucking, what an asshole. They're like, do you believe in biomass? And he's like, yeah, I burn a fucking fire at my house. What a douchebag.
And he's the one that said in there, that's not what this day is about. You know what? If you make a fucking provincial comment to me like that in that point, I might just, even if I'm the person that's filming myself, I might knock your
punch
fucking
you
dick off.
Square in your fucking face.
Yeah, Bill McKibben, you're a fucking sellout cockbag.
Well, he might have been a cockbag the entire time, so he might not have been a sellout.
Well, If you were a cockbag before, you were a cockbag before. But whatever it was that you presented yourself as way back in the day, you should be embarrassed, and you need to revise your position in relation to a lot of stuff.
All right, people, we will be back for part 2 of this wonderful environmental episode on green energy.
720-334 roll.
Shortbusdebateclub at yahoo.com.
Adios.
Roll, bitches, roll.